I think maybe this year would be the year of kind of personal assistant. Last year was all agents. It's just like people figuring out how to connect it to their own kind of stuff.
Well, and you see that with the big companies too, with Gemini and even Apple trying to play catch up, right? Where like they're going to launch their new Siri stuff in the next couple of months or something. And then in September, they're going to have like the full on Chat GPT experience built into iOS. So, I mean, it seems like when that starts to happen, then it pushes normal people into the new world.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'm joined by Tanner Linsley, if you haven't figured that out yet. He's the creator of the TanStack universe with all the TanStack libraries from React Query or TanStack Query, React Router or TanStack Router, TanStack Start, TanStack AI, TanStack DB. There's a lot that is happening there. And today I thought maybe we talk about all of this. We touch about what these are, but also dive deeper into TanStack Start. I come from React and Next.js world, and I want to kind of learn and understand the API design behind TanStack Start, and maybe we can build a little cool kind of demo application of the TanStack Start. But before we get there, Tanner, give us a 2-minute high-level overview of what you're building, and more specifically, the TanStack Start project.
Yeah, so TanStack Start is probably best described to people as a Next.js type of thing or a remix thing. It's a meta framework, not a framework or a UI framework, which we should have named these things different because Next and TanStack Start and Remix and React Router, these are more frameworks than React itself. So TanStack Start's interesting because it is a meta framework, but it's designed to work with any UI framework. It only supports React and Solid right now, but it works with both of them. If you tear it apart into its modular pieces, TanStack Start is a huge chunk of it is TanStack Router. You can't really have a framework without a router. And that's what I built very first. And then next to that is this TanStack Start. I wouldn't call it a wrapper. It's a companion package that allows TanStack Router to be full stack. So it gives you entry points for handling requests and returning responses. That's what TanStack Start is. It's actually, it's not a server. It's a request handler. Mm-hmm. And we can bundle that up and push it to anywhere that serves requests. So whether it's Cloudflare, Netlify, if you want to use Nitro and push it to wherever, or Railway even. We've been working with Railway recently. So you can push TanStack Start really anywhere. And as long as you can route requests to it, it will handle those requests. So what Start brings to the table, where TanStack Router would just be like a Vite SPA type of a thing. You just create a static SPA. TanStack Router is full SSR. So when the request comes into TanStack Start, it's doing SSR by default. It can do a couple of other things too. It can handle just regular API requests. So you can do API endpoints, all your basic methods and verbs. You can wire those into other tools like TRPC or Hano or whatever. You also have this happy path though that is rendering markup. It's the SSR path. And that goes into React Router and renders markup and runs your app during SSR and streams, preferably streams all that markup down to the client, hydrates it on the client into an SPA that is pretty normal and regular setup at that point.
Okay, cool. So,
and that's to start. There's other things.
Yes.
Start. What an overloaded word, but
exactly. So at a high level, it's a meta framework that gives you server-side capability around TanStack Router, which was a client-side single-page application type router. And with that comes a lot of functionalities that your server can expose, middlewares, API endpoints, CON optimization, and whatnot. But at a high level, I feel like the way that you explained it, it feels like it is once that SSR comes and hydrates, you are dealing with a client-side application. So TanStack Start is a client-first approach to implementing server-side or not React server components, but server-side functionality into our React application.
We can talk about server components in a minute.
Yep. All right. So where do we go from here? Should I share my screen and start building? And as we are building a quick demo, you explain the APIs and we take it
that would be great.
Okay, so let me just share my screen here.
And actually, we'll show you two things. Well, let me check if it even deployed. I've been working on it this morning, so I want to make sure that it works. Yeah, okay. In fact, go down. We could just go to Start and go through like the CLI experience, but let's try something new. So this is where you would normally come. You want to start TanStack Start. I haven't updated links here yet, though. Mm-hmm. If you go back to the home page, just hover over that menu, either way.
Here.
Go down. There's a builder right here that says it's in alpha state. So this is something new that I've been working on. So Jack Harrington built this scaffolding tool that's been around for a while now for TanStack Start, but it's always been CLI only. He toyed around with a UI version of that would just spin up from the terminal and let you do some things. And I saw that and I was like, this is gold, but we got to do it. We got to do it on tanstack.com. So that's what this is. TanStack Builder is like a graphical way to approach this. So right out of the gate, it's already set up to give you a basic TanStack Start setup. So yeah, we can kind of see like what you're going to get. Here's the file tree of what's going to come down with this. In fact, you can even hit the preview button over on the right, or up on that tab. If you hit preview, I'm going to cross my fingers here. Oh, okay. That's totally fine. I literally pushed this morning.
Yeah.
So the preview is a little alpha.
Okay.
What you can do is go up to this build button. We're just on the blank React template. And I'm assuming you want, let's just do React for everyone else's sake. So we could create a new GitHub repo, or we can just download the zip, or you can grab this command right here and just paste that right into there.
Terminal.
Hit OK. And I think I already spotted a bug with my new builder, but I'm not going to say anything unless it actually triggers. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Don't do Y. Just do that npx. In fact, remove everything after my TanStack app. Yeah. You're like the very first person I've seen use this since I tried publishing. So
okay.
Apparently I need some more tests.
All right. So basically what we're doing here is we're running the TanStack CLI instead of TanStack Start latest, which is just scaffolding everything that we just saw in that example, but here in a new application.
If you go to the docs, you would see a npm create at tanstack/start at latest. This is the exact same thing, but what we're doing is unifying all of our different CLI like functionality into a single at tanstack/CLI. And in fact, if you wanted, you could even install it globally and you'd be able to just type TanStack and you'd have the TanStack CLI. So there's some more things coming in this area in the future, but for now, this works. So this scaffolds out, by default, scaffolds out a TanStack Start bare minimum app. You should be able to npm install and npm dev and C or pnpm, whatever you use. You got to do run dev. Yeah, I'm used to pnpm. I'm sorry. There you go. Cool.
Okay.
It's not looking super great. I think that's because we didn't include Tailwind, but I think that's fine.
I think if we were to run, just so we have this experience side by side, if we are running npm create,
let's just use this one. Yeah.
It's at TanStack.
It's at TanStack/start at latest.
Just so we see some of the options. So it starts by naming the project. Let's say we call it TanStack starter. And then your linter, choose biome. And then it has some cool options here that actually might make sense for you to explain. So it comes with adapters if you're deploying to Cloudflare, Netlify versus a, I guess, platform agnostic kind of adapter, which is Nitro.
Yeah. So Nitro kind of already does a lot of different deployment destinations, but those two that you saw for Cloudflare and Netlify are Vite-native. So that means it's there. It's a new type of plugin that we're building that, Cloudflare can have one plugin that works for all frameworks. It's not like a TanStack Cloudflare thing. It's more like a Vite Cloudflare thing, and we just use it. It's pretty cool. So
absolutely,
there's a couple of options there. Yeah, and then we have all these add-ons that you can pick from. So we automatically include the Start add-on when you run this version of it, but you can pick a bunch of others. I don't think it's worth clicking any of these unless you really want to have them there.
Okay, so you can select the database, you can select your ORM, the flavor of it, Prisma, Drizzle, authentication.
A lot of these are cool. Like they don't just add the dependency, like they set it up for you. They give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
They'll integrate things together. It's pretty neat.
Pretty neat. Yeah, I like this one as well. Okay, so we're going to go with the bare bone here. And would you like an example so you can have examples, or just, again, start from the bare bone? Okay, so this is installing. Probably this one comes already baked in with the Tailwind.
Hopefully.
I tested this out with Bun this morning, and it was way quicker than this.
Yeah, Bun is fast, isn't it? You can use Bun too, but...
Okay, so let's open this up. Let me close this one. Which one did I close? There we go. Let me make this bigger. So let's run this one as well. Let me shut that off. Close this, and here npm run dev. All right. Okay.
There we go. That one looks good.
Yes. Beautiful. Okay, so right out of the gate, you get some cool stuff here already. We started from the bare bones starter package, but it also has some cool new paths and routes already, APIs that you can explore.
So this homepage is SSR'd by default, even though we're not doing anything tricky.
Okay.
That homepage is, all that markup is being generated on the server and streamed down to the client.
Okay.
And that's this index page right here. So
okay.
Yeah, like, I mean, we should take a look at this. There's nothing tricky going on here. This is just React of what you're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a route definition right there, create file route. People might you have the dev server running right now, right? The first question I get is like, why do I have to repeat the path in that create file route right there? In fact, if you just delete that slash or just type something random in there and then hit save, you'll notice something funny.
Okay, it goes back to being slash. Okay.
Yeah, so that is literally the only special thing that we have to do to teach TypeScript about the file system, because TypeScript is incapable of understanding the file system. It's just not built in for it. It's impossible. But we can simulate that by letting TypeScript know the file that we're in. And we don't want to leave that up to chance. So in our development server that we run, we're watching that string and we're making sure that it always matches what should be the path from what you have in your file-based routing. So a good example is if you come over here to routes, the routes directory, just create a new file and just
new file.
Yeah, you can do a new file or whatever. Create a new route. It's called test. Yeah. So this would be /test.
Yep.
You just created.
You'll just notice auto-generated this for me.
It automatically filled it, and if we were to change the name of that file, change it from test, not
here,
the string there. Yeah, okay. Change the name of the file to something different. Sure. It automatically updates. So we're managing that for you, file-based routing. But once you have that, everything's completely type safe.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to import anything or turn anything on or remember. In fact, you'll have to learn that it's so type safe that it's not going to let you do things unless you do them in a type safe way. That doesn't mean you have to write a bunch of TypeScript. It just means that we're going to be inferring
the types,
everything that we can. Yeah.
Yeah, your routes and your paths.
Yep.
Okay, so this function seems to be a critical function in our routes in that, first of all, it gives you the type safety, but assuming other than the component, this is going to help you maybe with data fetching and loading and whatnot.
This is where you configure everything about this route. In Next.js, people are used to having multiple files per route, like a layout or a meta or what, I don't know. There's lots of different, or page, right? With TanStack Start, there are file-based routing. There are not separate files. It's all right there in that configuration object. So if you wanted to add a loader, you would do it in that object. If you wanted to add metadata, you would do it here. So all of the configuration for this route lives right here.
Okay. And before we get to those configs, you mentioned that we can create files here. Can I create a route by saying like a folder test and then inside of it I put like an index?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you do that, if you do an index like that, yeah, TSX, go change tests-demo that you have down there to just test. And let's go look at your server, your CLI that you have running. So let's see, is it okay? We may fix this. So sometimes you can run into the situation where we have what we call a hybrid file-based routing system, where you can use file names with dots, or you can use directories. You can use either one. Sometimes you can end up creating the same route, but with two different flavors, and we'll warn you if that ever happens.
Okay.
But what you have done, what you have done now is you have created a layout route.
Okay.
So go to your file that's test.tsx. Okay. And instead of hello test, change this to test layout and then render an outlet.
Oops, sorry.
Comes with an outlet component. Yep. That'll import from there. And now go to your test index page. There you go.
I have that layout. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So routes are like branches. I mean, it's the same as any other router, but the difference is that index.tsx is when you're actually targeting that there's nothing, that there are no more matches after that. And this is where it does act more like React Router and Remix in that sense. And
that's the field that
I prefer that. Next.js has a little bit of a different matching EX. So if we were to create another file inside of this test directory and just call it
demo.tsx.
TSX, yeah, this is test/demo.
Okay.
And if we were to go to that route in your browser, you will still see the layout from our test layout.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So if you're having like a file here that acts or can act as a layout, if you just render this outlet, so it plugs in everything that comes after it here. But then you can also group them or organize them inside folders if that helps. And
let me show you some more tricky things that are really fun. So people who are used to using Next.js, they'll love this. Take that test file that you have, rename it to route.
Turn it into a route?
Just rename it to route.tsx.
Okay.
And move it inside of the test folder.
Okay. Does that become like an API now?
Okay. So what this is now is this is the layout. This is the layout route for the test directory. So this isn't super clear, I'll be honest. You know what would make it more clear, though, for people who are used to Next.js? Go to your Vite config, and inside of TanStack Start right there, create a new object on line 25 inside of TanStack Start. Yep. And then inside of here, there'll be, it's under router, I think. It might auto-complete for you. Yep, router. And then inside of here, there is a route token. No?
Just route.
Token? Let me look that up. Yeah, it should be route token. It would be under router.
Sorry. Okay.
Does that check out?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah? Okay, here's a fun one. Change it to Change it to like layout.
Need the curly braces here.
Yeah, not layout token, just, yeah. Cool, save that. And now go back to our route file and rename it to layout. Cool. So we just recreated a piece of Next.js's file-based routing convention.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's very customizable. You could even change the index token. Right now we use index to target slash exactly.
Yeah.
You could change that to underscore index or page or
I
whatever.
See.
So
I see.
yeah. You could also take all of those files and unnest them from test, the directory, and just put test dot in the file name before all of them. And you could do a flat routing structure. We don't need to do that.
Does that also apply to the layout? So test.layout.tsx?
Yeah, it would work. So
Okay.
dots in the file name correspond to, unless it's a suffix.
And I perhaps don't need index, or do I still go test.index?
If you move it out, yeah, you'll want test.index. Yep.
Okay, test.demo.
And then you just move them all out into the routes folder, and then you can get rid of test. This is a pretty intense demonstration for like how flexible the file system routing is.
Wow.
So
yeah.
That's the exact same setup as we had with directories. We're just using file names. So, and you can mix and match. Once you get into a directory, you could do flat from that point down, or you can do flat until you get to a specific route, and then do a directory. There's even the concept of something called virtual file routes, where similar to React Router, I think, you can define your file routing structure with code that maps to some custom file-based routing system. It's very, very flexible. We don't need to dig too far into it, but I did want to go over some of those really like basic, like, hey, I've been using Next and I'm Next-brained and pilled.
Yep.
How do I reason about this?
Yes.
Use directories, use index. Route.tsx is basically layout, and you can change it if you want, and you've got to render outlets.
Yeah.
Whereas with Next, you're probably used to rendering the props.children, which is, yeah. So same thing.
Yeah. No, I think it's pretty cool, and it's pretty important, because that's where everybody gets started: routing. How do I define my routes? How do I organize them into different folders? How do I create nested routes? Basically, here you can have shared layouts with the way that we just did it. We can have nested layouts, so you can go deeper down into that nested route and have just a shared layout for a subcom. You can use it file-based, you can use it folders, you can use it with the dot notation here. So it's just basically customizable to your flavor of however your mental model works for
However
your
you think.
routing. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so we got our paths down, and would the next thing be data fetching?
Yeah, let's do some data fetching. We can do it wherever you want.
Okay, so we are in the test demo. Let's just stay in the test demo.
Let's do a fun one. Let's do it in the test. So what's fun here is we have test.layout. You can actually just remove layout from it. Just do test.tsx. That'll be the same thing, because those layout names, they only really matter for if you're in a directory, which is kind of like, help me target the directory I'm in, you know. This way you don't need that. So test dot, that's just the wrapper for all test dot things, right?
Okay.
Test.demo is test/demo, test.index is test/nothing.
Yep.
So inside of our test file, which is a layout route, or I mean, it's layout. It wraps those. We could do some data fetching in here so that all of the test/routes have something in there. So up here above component, I just type loader, and let's just return something stupid from here right now. Yeah. And then go down to our route component where we have test layout.
Here?
Sorry, all these words are overloaded. Yes. in our function, our route component function, we're going to grab that loader data that we just fetched inside of here.
Okay.
So that would work, actually, if you did this.
Okay.
However, it wouldn't be type safe without some work. You could use loader data, and inside of there, you could say what route it's coming from.
Hmm.
So you could pass an object and do from, and then pass inside of that layout right there, you would have to pass the /test, like which route is it coming from.
Like this?
And that's type safe too. Yeah. So that first one is correct. And then you'll notice that message is type safe, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a string. That's a lot of work. That's stupid. You could do this in any other file, by the way, as long as and it will actually check it at runtime, where if you do this in a matching segment that doesn't have /test matched, you'll get an error. It won't even render, which is great. But there's an easier way to do this. So just use the route that you created up there, const route.
Okay.
Route dot and it'll be capital route. There. Same thing.
All right.
So
And with that, I didn't need to
you don't
have,
have to
because I've already
specify.
created this object here and I already had everything. So I just get that object and get the
Yep.
loader data from it. Okay.
And you'll notice that like all of we have generic versions of all these APIs that you can use just without the route, without anything pre-bound. You can use those, but they're not going to be type safe unless you specify where they're coming from. So it is 100% type safe. If you don't supply what we need to make it type safe, we kind of yell at you.
Yeah.
It yells at you.
Yes.
And this will work without saving the file. This doesn't rely on any type of generation, anything like that. It does rely on the route tree.gen.ts. You'll notice that file. We do generate one file. This is the file where we teach TypeScript about the file system. But you'll notice there's no like types in here about the route, your data itself. It's mostly just like, here's the routing hierarchy. And then after that, everything's fully inferred. So this file generates one time or when you change your routes or add a new route. Yeah. And you never have to worry about it. The types themselves are actually inferred throughout the system. So if you were to change a type in one file, it will be immediately propagate to every other file in your system just using regular TypeScript LSP and TSC. Mm-hmm. You don't have to regenerate or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we can render that message. Let's do that inside of here. Yeah, perfect.
Yep, we did it. So we have the message over here.
Yep. Let's do something a little more tricky. Let's do
here.
Yeah.
Let's just have this as okay.
Very cool. So what's interesting? So let's do this. This came from the server because this SSR'd. Go back to click on like the home page or click on the logo. Sorry, in the app. Click on the logo to go to the home page. Now use the back button to come back. Okay, so the time updated.
Mm-hmm.
But that time, the time here did not come from the server because we did not SSR. We're in SPA now. When you click the logo and come back, that is an SPA
client-side navigation. So therefore, everything is rendering on the client.
Yeah. So let's go back to our code. I'm going through all the gotchas because I know people are going to look at this first through. I use Next.js. How do I reason about this? and then when they see loader, they're going to be like, oh, I used Remix one time. I know how that works. So here's the other thing. So loader is isomorphic. And isomorphic means that it runs on both the server during SSR and it runs on the client.
Right.
And what this means is that, and new date to isostring, we're lucky that that works the same way on the client and the server. But like, let's try this with something that wouldn't work on the client versus the server. Let's see. File system. Oh, like OS, CPU, or something like that. I'm trying to think. We can go both ways here. Let's do that. Let's import from OS and like let's print out the number of like CPU cores that are available.
Okay.
I can't remember how to do that. It's like I'm trying to rack my brain on how to do it. It's like you import from, let's see, node OS core count.
Module.
Number of processors available. Yeah, it's os.cpus. So if you import OS, yeah, and you'll have to import OS. It's like import OS from node :OS, or yeah, there it is. Let's see if that works. Okay, now just hit refresh. Refresh the screen. Okay, cool. This is expected. So if you notice, there's a flash, but if you refresh, you will see it flash the right thing for like a split second. You can see it there. But what happens then is React tries to hydrate, and we try to turn it into an SPA, and we get this error. And this trips people up all the time because in our code, they assume that if we're in a loader and we're loading data, we're on the server.
This runs both on the server and the client.
Right. And they're like, what the heck? This is stupid. I hate this framework. Like, I may give up right here. So the solution here is to make sure that our data, OS CPUs, that logic only runs on the server. And the best way to do that is to create a server function. So up above our route, up here, just do a new, like on line 3, just do const get CPUs. Yep. Equals create server function.
Equal to.
Yep. And create server function will come from TanStack Start. Perfect. Yep. And yeah, we can just use a get here because we're not mutating anything. So using the get method makes sense. If you're used to using like Next.js, server actions and things, that they default to post, like using the post. I like to use the method get on things that could be cacheable.
Okay.
Because you'll get caching from on get requests from the browser or CDNs if you use that. The handler specifies what function, what logic to call on the server. And then get CPU server function is just a function we can call at that point, just like you've done here. So what this is going to do is loader is going to execute during SSR when we render the initial SSR. And then on the client, when we're navigating to it with SPA navigations, it's also going to run again. But it's going to call get CPU server function. What this does is it uses a fetch call. It just bridges back to your server to get the os.cpu's logic and then bring it back.
Okay. So let me summarize what I understood. The create server function, well, the first question is, it doesn't matter that we are now exporting something that is not probably compiled correctly on the client side. This can still live here, but the system understands that this is only used inside of our server function that only needs to be executed or be included in the bundle for the server.
Right.
Okay.
On the most basic level, yes. This isn't how I would end up organizing my code.
Yeah, you would have like a separate file for your server access,
I would
server
put
functions.
server code in a server directory or a .server file somewhere else. And we're going to ship 1.0 with mechanisms to make it so that if you do that, you'll be sure that your build will not complete if you try and import server stuff into the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we've been doing this for a long time. We did this with Next.js Pages Router, does this to some extent. Remix does this. Yeah. This is it's a pretty well-established pattern. We use, it's proactive dead code elimination. So we actually go through this file for the server version, and we will strip out things that don't need to be there on the server. And then on the client, we'll do the same thing. We strip out, we'll stub out the server function for our fetch call, right? And that removes all of that logic from os.cpus. And then we look at all of our other variables in the file. We say, are these even referenced anywhere? What's using them? And if they don't get referenced or used in the client version, then we just rip them out.
Okay. So to me, it feels like, well, going back to the first point that you mentioned, the way that we organize this in, .servers, where you are maybe creating your data access layer where you have all of your functions there, and those are only supposed to be like server stuff. So it's just a matter of organization. But the way here, how it works is what you explained to me is very similar to how we had get server-side props in the pages router in Next.js, where there you could also have node module and then which is only used in the get server-side props, but you actually had React components up in the actual page export and whatever. So this is kind of similar in that there are two different boundaries and everything gets bundled up where it is supposed to be used.
Absolutely. You could almost think of it as import OS from Node OS, as if you were doing like an inline import of that inside of that handler. And then on the client, we would just strip that whole function away, just disappears.
Got it.
And that works. I like that works. But like I said, this is not how I would organize the code. I would take that and the OS import and I would put them into we should probably do that. Let's just do that right now. If you just select it, select all that and the import.os and Command-Shift P and do refactor. Yep, go to refactor and move to a new file. And that put it into get CPU server function. Let's move that file into like a source/server directory.
Sorry.
There. Now we're exporting get CPU server function. We're importing it here. Perfect.
Beautiful.
This is a great way to organize it. Right this minute, it won't warn you right now if some of this server stuff ends up in the final build. We're working on that.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, we basically have it done. We just need to ship it.
Yes.
This is how I would organize it.
Okay. Now, coming back to this loader pattern or this function that we had, I feel like this is my understanding, that it is kind of the combination of React Server Components or a data fetching ability from the server plus the server action that we have in Next.js, if I'm looking at it from that lens. In server actions in Next.js, you typically use them for mutations or with the post request. This can do both. It can be get posts or mutation or the initial data load that you're doing. But basically, it also exposes it as a function to the client that can be called from server, from client, data fetching, mutation. It's all compact into one.
Yep.
And perhaps that's why you don't need React Server Components here necessarily.
Right. Because Next.js and also the React core team to some extent, they see React Server Components as this. They're very powerful. It is a very powerful primitive. And just like how with other really powerful primitives, you can use powerful primitives to accomplish things that other primitives would be good at as well. Like you can shoehorn things into places. We've been doing that for years with other primitives and tools, but it's not always, I mean, there's many ways, different ways to do things, right? And React Server Components, I think that yes, they're an amazingly powerful primitive. Can they be used as a data fetching mechanism? Absolutely. You can, because they run on the server, you're guaranteed that you will be able to do asynchronous things inside of them. That's great. And so a lot of people see that as, oh, this is the missing data fetching mechanism that we've wanted for everything. And so they say, well, let's just do all of our data fetching in React Server Components. But then data fetching is so tied up with routing and parallelization and performance that now if you buy into that notion that it all needs to happen in server components, you kind of need to base your entire routing strategy and your caching strategy. And, it starts to pile on where if that's the system you buy into for all of the things you do, you end up rewriting your entire framework and your whole methodology on top of React Server Components. And it is possible. That's what Next.js is. But the way that I see it is that React Server Components are really good at a couple of things that you cannot do other places. Like, you can do data fetching other ways. You can do routing and layout other ways. Like, there are other ways to do those things. And I like those other ways. I've been doing them for a decade, right? And that's why I built React Query and why I built TanStack Router. But what you can't do with these existing tools that React Server Components are really good at is static markup, where you can run either cheap or expensive code to produce some output, some JSX, right? And then you can ship only that JSX to be rendered, instead of needing to ship all of the utilities that you needed to produce it to the client as well. A good example is a blog post. I mean, it is actually one of the best examples, because if you think about, if you want to have Markdown power your blog post, that seems really simple, but you're going to have, eventually you're going to need a system that can take the Markdown file, parse the front matter, and then whatever's left over, it's going to need to transform that Markdown into an HTML syntax tree, essentially. And then if you want to do further customization on it in React world and not just dangerously insert HTML, you'll have to, again, translate that into some type of JSX tree. The tools for that pipeline are not cheap. MDX, if you've ever worked with MDX, the pipeline here is expensive. And anytime that if you don't have server components, you can server render that markup for your blog post on the server just fine. SSR works. But then when you get to the client, you have to hydrate. If you want everything to become interactive, you got to hydrate. And the only way to produce that markup again on the client is to go through everything you just did on the server, but on the client. So you got to ship down the markdown parser. You have to ship down the syntax, highlighting. Everything's got to go down to the client again. And that's just a big bummer. So for static markup, static data that's rarely changing, server components are fantastic. A blog post is great. You do it once on the server. You produce this static blob of JSX, and then you just send that down. And because it doesn't change often, you can cache it. You can manipulate it as if it's just an asset, like it's JSON almost. Does that make sense? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the way that we're approaching it with TanStack Start. And
Okay.
if you want to, we can get into what that will look like. I can even show you what the API is going to look like if you want. It won't work obviously right now in your version.
Yeah. But no, that's an interesting concept that you just mentioned there with the React Server Components and the benefit of having a smaller bundle size when you're shipping it to the client. So if it is a static, you don't need anything. You just ship less JavaScript or all of that pipeline that you just mentioned for, I don't know, MDX. So, and I can now see how that also can benefit inside of TanStack Start, where you would have routes that don't need those type of stuff. So they would just benefit from SSR or server rendered pages. You just ship HTML or
let's make a server component right now. Let me show you how it will work. It's not going to render, but I'll show you in the code how it works. Take this message, this hello test layout data, this that you have right there, that template string.
Okay.
And right there, just grab that whole thing, cut it, and let's go over to our get CPU server function. Inside of here, instead of just returning os.cpus, let's return our string with os.cpus inside of it, right? This could be a server component. I know it's just text, but let's make it interesting. Instead of the template string, let's turn it into like a div tag.
Like this?
Yep. And we can get rid of the ticks now if they don't need to be there, because we're just in React and we don't need the $sign. So we're just going to return JSX. Yep.
Is it for some reason my linter, is it not working? Is it the formatting?
You've got Well, yeah, why is it not working in here? It should be fine now. If you format,
Yeah,
Control
it doesn't.
Command Shift
Usually,
C format. That's weird. Oh, there we go.
there now. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a server component. Now, in TanStack Start, you won't just be able to return JSX. What you'll need to do is you'll have to, it'll be async, and then you'll call a function called createServerComponent.
Here.
Nope, it'll be what you're returning.
Okay.
And it actually might even be render server component, I think. Is what
Create
we're
server.
It won't get auto completed because it's not going to work. But I'm going to show you what the code would look like, and it would be render server component, not create server component. So we're just saying take this server component I have and render it to a stream.
Mm-hmm.
So your server functions that we were just using to pass data back and forth are the same transport mechanism for server components. So now when we it'll be get CPU server function. Go back to our tests now, our test file. And what we'll get back from that, this data right here, just pass that down through message. Or no, you can just return it.
Return data.
Just, return data just like that. And now you don't need to destructure message. You'll just get data. And this data is a server component. So you could just, pop it in right there. There you go. This would render. Not in your version. But that's how easy it is, right?
Yes.
And what's cool about this is if you go back to test our route, so this would be called a whole lot. Right now, so TanStack Router has a miniature React query built into it where it does SWR caching. So every time we come to this route, it'll show the old data while we fetch the new data. It's just a React query ism. But if we wanted to, we could actually call get CPU server function. We could do that in React query if we wanted. And we could use React query to cache the server component that we just made. And if we ever need to invalidate it, we could invalidate only that server component instead of the whole page, which is really another thing. Like when we release React server components, people will have a hard time again unlearning what they have been Next-brained with, because right now with Next, you have to revalidate tag and tag server components. And I mean, in reality, they've almost recreated React query, but it only works on their router and the server. And it ends up invalidating a lot of the page. With this approach, you can create server components that are very granular. You can put them wherever you want because they're just streams. Like that data that you get back from await.cpu server function, that's going to be a stream, like an actual like web stream. And you could cache it however you want. You could put that into, like we're doing here, the router, and let the router cache it. Hopefully your router has caching. I think TanStack Router is the only one that has really good caching built in. Or you throw it into React query, you cache it there. Or you could even throw it into TanStack DB. Like it's just a primitive that you can throw around. And then when you're ready to render it, you render it here.
So this is what I understood. Correct me if I'm wrong. First off, this loader that comes with the TanStack Start, or which is basically the router, it does some caching. So it already caches some of the stuff you're returning. But how you're explaining React Server Components to me is that you're almost looking at them as data. It's just like a payload. Data. Yep. It's just the server side, the server component payload that you're just now, you can cache it with React query like you would do any other data, or I don't know, SCDN or the DB. So you're not thinking about React Server Component as like the way Next.js thinks about them as a component that has data fetching. You are looking at the whole thing as a payload, and you're like, okay, You could just pass this around however you want, render it when it's possible, cache it however you want with the library that you like.
Right. And React Router, the Remix team, they know this as well. Their version is very much in this direction as well, where it's just data that you return and that you render, which is great. I think together we have seen this as just data for a really long time since they came out. I've always wanted to just look at them as another type of data. So it's almost just like JSON, but instead of JSON, you're getting back a stream that has markup in it and potentially more data. It's a much more flexible protocol than just JSON.
Is that to simplify caching mostly?
Yeah, I mean, what's cool about this is you can fetch as many of these server components as you want. They could be reusable, and then you can piece them together, and you can invalidate one of them without invalidating the rest of them. Or it's because the primitive data is there, you could technically take that stream, and if you wanted, and if you're smart and tricky enough, you could decode that stream and store it in local storage. Or heck, just use React Query, put the local storage adapter on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that will work. I mean, we could make that work, right? Where it would like decode the stream into a buffer text, basically. You could cache React server components in local storage, and bring them back to life when the user reloads the page and then invalidate them in the background. So you could do a lot of fun things here. And what's cool is, so out of the gate, we're going to support what you see here. We'll also support use client. So from here, if you rendered a link, like from TanStack router, if you rendered the link component in here, link is a client component. So we have use client at the top of our link component, and that would get sent down to the client and hydrated. So the link component would actually be rendered on the client, just like you're used to with Next. You can create components that have use client at the top, and those will become interactive when you push them down, all that same thing. But what I have seen and learned from a lot of people is that use client is confusing. It can confuse a lot of people. But what's interesting here is we're already on the client, because TanStack is a client-side first framework. So we're already approaching it from the concept of client. Can I show you one more thing? I want to tease this.
Absolutely.
I think this might break your brain, and maybe in a good way. But go back to our test file.
Okay.
Now, one thing that's interesting is we get this data back. This data is markup, right? But at this point, it is now a black box. Whatever data renders is just whatever it gave back to us. If we wanted to give it something to render at this point, we would have to pass it to get CPU server function, handle it in the server function itself, and then return it where it needs to be, right? That sucks, because I don't want to. What if inside of this get CPU server function, I had something from the client that I wanted to render? We could go back to our use server. Yeah, we could go back to the function, and we could go and create a client component here and say, hey, anytime this server component renders, there's going to be this client component there, and it's going to do this stuff. But the problem with that is that the server is deciding what to render. Like the server component that we write here, it would be deciding what to render on the client interactive every single time. And I hate to say it, but the server does not always know. It doesn't always have all the information needed to know what to render next on the client. So we're going to do something weird here, okay? No, I don't think anybody's ever seen this before. Instead of render server component, actually, no, bring that back. That was good. We're just going to rename it. We're going to call it create composite component. Now, just to the right of that, of where you are right now, we're going to make a function. And it's going to be props. So we're going to pass this create composite component call a function that is props as arguments, and then it returns our div that we have. So you can get rid of those two right there.
This you mean?
No, bring that back. That was good. That was good. Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Yep. Cool. So this is a composite component.
Okay, so to get some props and then, okay, got
Now,
the point.
These props are going to come from the client.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We can't do some things with them that we would normally be able to do in normal React land. Like we can't iterate over what props have been given to us. They haven't been given to us yet. But what it is they're like slots. If you wanted to call it slots, you totally could. It doesn't have to be called props. You call it slots. But let's do this. After CPUs, or just anywhere in here, we could call props.children. Let's just do that. Now, you probably wouldn't want to do it there, mostly just because it wouldn't make sense. Just do it after CPUs. Yeah. Props.children. Perfect. Okay. Let's go back to our... So what we're doing here, hold on, let me explain what we're doing here, is we're creating a composite component. Well, I'm curious if React Server Components are out by the time you air this, but...
Yeah.
So props.children is a proxy call. So when we render props.children, what we're really doing is we are telling this composite component that something on the client is going to fill this in for us. We could even make it a function. Props.children is a function. You got to call her a render prop or whatever. But let's just keep it props.children for now.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're saying is something's going to go here. As the server, we do not know what is going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Something's going to go there. Here's everything that we have, right? And it's not a client component because maybe the server doesn't even know, right? It's just an empty slot. So let's go back to our test file. And instead of just rendering this on line 18, instead of doing data, just get rid of that whole line. We're going to render a new component called composite component. Yep. And then you're going to give it a source, src. It'll actually be src, just like an image tag or something like that. And you'll pass it the data that we got, our server component. Now, it doesn't do this right now because you don't have it. Mm-hmm. But what's crazy is if you had everything installed like what it's going to be, you would get a type error right now that says composite component requires children. And you're like, wait, what? Oh, because in our server function, you would have had to type it. Yep, hit tab. Perfect. You would have wanted to type it, and it will force you to type it because props has to extend this. So if we go back now, you would need to supply it with children now.
Yep. So
you could either get rid of that or you could just pass children as a prop, whatever you want. You'll still need the source, the src data. But inside of there, we can pass whatever we want. We're back on the client. We're back in your client-side app. So we could pass literally it pass outlet. That's actually awesome. Just move the outlet down there.
Okay.
So what we're doing here, what's crazy is we created a composite component that's going to go and grab a server. It's some of its server, right? But then we've said that inside of that server component, we have a slot. It's not a client component. It's not something that we always, in this case, if it was just outlet, we could just put outlet in the server component if we wanted. But what if it was dynamic inside of here? We could rely on state inside of here to render something different inside of this. Maybe it's outlet, maybe it's something else. We could do a bunch of dynamic things that you wouldn't be able to do in a server component because it doesn't know everything. It only knows what's happening on the server, not on the client. So we could use local storage to decide, do we render this? Do we render that? We could use React query or whatever, it opens up a lot of possibilities because now our client is the one that decides what to compose. Our client is in charge of everything. And the client is really the only state of our application that knows everything or can access all of the data. I know it's not on the server, it's not close to the server data, but we can get it if we need to. But at the client, we have all of the state that we need to make the best decisions possible. So this outlet slot right here, this children that we created, it is, in a sense, just like use client. It's a client component, but we didn't have to use client. It's just a slot. We're just inverting control. That's what it is. This is inversion of control from the server back to the client. And it looks very explicit, right? In get CPU server function, in our server function that we created, everything in there is very explicit that, you know, here's props and those are going to get filled in later. Like we're just deferring. We're saying we don't know what goes here. We're only handling the responsibility that we've been given to supply some markup with the CPUs in it. Right?
I want to understand what, like, when we're calling it composite components, why is it called composite components? What is it trying to compose together? Is it because you can pass in props to it?
Yes, it's compositing both server component and client component in one go. You're creating a composite component. It's a component that can be composed of multiple pieces that don't need to be known ahead of time, right? It's almost like currying. In our server component, we're returning what we know up to that point, and then we're deferring for later, for something else to fill in the gaps. And then when we come down here to render it, we're saying, hey, we want to render what we got from the server, and it can even dictate to us that it needs more data from us on the client to complete the transaction, to complete the rendering cycle. It needs some children. It could even be optional. Even if we went back to our get CPU server function, if you just made that children : if you just do an optional, boom. Now, if we go back to our test, we could just render data. We wouldn't need composite component. Or if we want to inject something there that's not null,
we can get that outlet and children.
We can do it with that. One more. Now this is going to be fun. Okay, go back to our server function. Let's create a new prop next to children. Okay, let's call it footer. Sure, I don't care. It could be called anything, but it's not a React node. It's a function that returns a React node. So change that signature right there. Function returns React node. Yep. And now we're going to render footer. Yes, perfect. Tab that. And it's a function we got to call, right? Now go back to test. And let's supply it as it'll come after source. So it'll be footer. Perfect. Yeah. All right, there we go. What's cool here though?
You can do basically anything you want here with this.
Go back to our server function. What if we could send the CPU length in the footer? So when we call this function, when we call footer, send CPUs.length.
Here?
Yeah. Send os.cpus.length. Perfect. We got to change our function signature. Yes, perfect. CPU count. Okay, now go back to the client. And now you can pick that up right there in that function that's being called inside of footer. You will get CPU count.
Holy cow.
Because it's just flight data. It's just React server component flight data.
Yeah.
We are serializing. And what's lame is we can only serialize what the React flight serializer will support. But I mean, it supports a lot of stuff. Numbers, dates, objects and stuff. It's not quite as sophisticated as TanStack Start's serializer is. But you could even return promises there. You could call that with a promise, get that promise on the client, wait for it to resolve. You could use suspense.
Use the use hook.
You can start, but see, it's not just about what happens on the client and on the server, which is what normal server components had been up to this point. It is that, but it's also who gets to compose and decide what happens on the client and the server. With server components up to this point, with Next.js and React Router and whatever, the server, once you go to a server component, it has to decide everything, even what client components to render. And yes, you can make your way back to client-side stuff that way if you make a client component. But then what happens if we're caching this component in the old way? Think about the old way. If we were to cache this server component for a year, your CPU count might stay the same, but this footer and this outlet, like the children, those might change. And that's one of the problems with React server components, is that even when you want to slot in client-side things, if you want to ever change that, you have to invalidate it. You have to invalidate everything about it. And you're throwing away that work you did on the server. With this approach, what's cool is we could go and we could call router.invalidate right now. We could make a mutation, we could do whatever, we call router.invalidate. The router is going to go and refetch this server component, right? And maybe it's cached. Maybe it's like, it could be a CDN. It could go to the CDN, and the CDN's like, I've been told to cache this response stream for like a day. So here it is again, you get the same one. And it comes back down. But even though we got the same server component, we get to decide different client things to render in those slots. That is ultra powerful. The client remains in control for the things that render on the client. And the server is just build me this static markup, put it as a primitive data point, let me cache it, let me do whatever. So I know that this is a lot.
Yeah, this is definitely a new paradigm, and it's more of a complex kind of topic. Basically, what I understood most as the immediate use case is like how caching works and the example you just gave at the end.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there's more to it than what I understood now, but it is a different paradigm, definitely.
I think that there's probably not more to it. That's what makes it weird, is that what's going to make people scratch their heads is because it's so primitive and it is a low-level API and it's so flexible. That's where your brain starts to hurt, is you're like, whoa, I could do this. Or what can I do? And your brain starts thinking like, well, I could compose things however I want. I could interleave, before with server components, yeah, you could interleave server and client, but the server was the one who had to decide. With this, you just treat the server as this implementation detail that's feeding you markup, but then you're back on the client and you get to do all of the normal things that you've been doing on the client for the last 10 years with SPAs. You can use all of the client-side things and all the browser things, but you still get to utilize and cache and granularly invalidate server markup. So I think the head scratcher is in its simplicity, in the primitives. And the part that explodes is what's possible. Instead of the opposite, where I think most people get really deep into the current server component methodology and they're constantly switching between, okay, am I in a server component or am I in a client component? You're opting into the client. And that's really mentally taxing. From all the Next.js stuff that I've tried and written and the people that I've talked to that have gone really deep into it, opting into the client from the server is a mentally taxing effort. Not very different from when we were just writing a ton of PHP and then serializing jQuery stuff into it. It's possible, but it is mentally taxing, I think. And this, at least for me, is so much easier to reason about because I can just keep the same exact cognitive state the entire time I'm building my app, which is I'm on the client. Unless I'm in a server function that is very explicit. All of the code in a server function will run on the server, but unless that's the case, I'm on the client all the time. And that way, instead of always crossing these environment boundaries and this server client gap that you have to create over and over, you're kind of creating this gap all the time. What am I in? I just think it's easier to just say you're always on the client, and if you need something from the server, go get it. And if you do, you cache it.
Yeah.
Or it's just data.
So just to, like, as I understood now, is you're always on a client. If you want to fetch data, you have these server functions you can call from the client, get data, post data. You can also return either server components or composite components from this kind of server functions. If you want something that's just merely server components that returns some JSON payload, sure, that's your server component. It just loads. If you need a composite component where you can actually pass props to it, and it's on a client that decides what actually gets rendered finally, that would be the use case for the composite component. But all in all together, you're always on the client side. You're in the React land as we have been in the past, I don't know, however many years before the server-side frameworks. And then we opt into getting data from the server when we need to.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's you get to decide on a granular level what comes from the server, how you cache it. Even if you decide you want everything to come from the server, that's possible. You're going to do all of your rendering in a server component, and you can cache it forever. If you've got a blog post and you just want to say, it's funny, if you're doing a blog, you could literally write a server component that returns your entire blog post, and your route will be super tiny. It will just be like, go get the blog markup, render the blog. That's it. But there's still this client harness there, and it may end up being really, really lightweight if all you're doing is just doing server component stuff.
Super cool. Super cool. I think hopefully we would have you back for more sessions. I think we can show cool examples and patterns and architecture as this is becoming more baked in. When are you expecting for the 1.0 version to come out?
We're going to release server components ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be kind of like released. They'll be in the release candidate, and they'll be like very early. So be like, hey, we're trying this out. It's still release candidate. We might go through some small patches, but after we get React Server Components out, we're going to be prepping for a 1.0 release as soon as possible. There's really not much else that needs to change. Some documentation, some helper utilities, maybe around managing head, meta tags and things. Just very small housekeeping items. Yeah. And then 1.0, hopefully soon. It'll definitely be this quarter. Mm-hmm. The first quarter of 2026 for 1.0. Hopefully sooner. I mean, if we had our way and everything, all the stars aligned, it would be within weeks, but it's really hard to say. We'll have to see what happens with server components when we release them in the release candidate. If everybody uses them, it's great, and it goes off without a hitch, then expect 1.0 very, very soon.
One thing that I noticed on my end, the APIs seem to be pretty stable, but on the documentation side, I think there's a lot of information there that I was going through that's just like in terms of guides, it's like you have to go. I think maybe better hierarchy of information for folks to just go through what they need to just get started and then go to more advanced stuff. It's just like literally out there, all of them there. So it's a bit difficult to find your way around, or you just have to just read everything there.
Yeah, the docs are very much structured right now as we have this framework with a bunch of primitives, and we just kind of dumped all of the primitive concepts there on their own. They do not read like, say, React Query or TanStack Query, where it's more like linear. There's a lot of jumping around. We are currently in the middle of a big overhaul of documentation, not just docs, but also just like agent stuff, skills, context, agents, context, etc. So expect a really, really big polishing push moment for all of that, probably around the same time, hopefully before we 1.0.
Yeah, That'd be great. I mean, having your skills and actually teaching your coding agent know how to build TanStack Start before you even understand it, it would be like great. All right, perfect. So thanks
Okay.
for the time today. We'll hopefully have you for more TanStack Start related stuff, but TanStack AI and everything else that you're cooking up with your maintainers and contributors. Any final say
No,
before we
not
wrap up?
really. I think React Server Components is kind of the big teaser, and I just showed it off. There's lots of other fun things coming with TanStack that don't even have to do with Start. But yeah, just make sure you follow us, like the maintainers and everybody on Twitter, and you'll be up to speed with everything that we have to show off. So
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Tanner, for joining me on the show. That was a wrap, folks, for an introduction to TanStack Start and what's coming in the version 1.0. If you have any questions, hit us up down in the comments. Tanner's and the team's social links will be down in the description, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.